Genesis chapter 25, we read the story of Jacob and Esau. And if any of you grew up with a sibling, you can identify with some of the drama. Now, I was the older sibling, and I feel compelled in the house of God to confess on behalf of all older siblings, we're sorry. If you are a younger sibling, we're sorry we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't realize how much it affected you. It's just that we got a laugh, or it felt good at the time, or you could be a little annoying. We did have other friends, other things to do. So I apologize. I did actually, this is a true story, I did at one time in my adult life apologize to my brother, which was in order, because I started to think about all the things I did as an older sibling without thinking. I remember a time, for instance, in our life where my brother, when his teeth were coming in, you know, you lose your teeth, and for whatever reason, his two front teeth came in first as big adult teeth, so they were kind of bigger than the rest of his mouth, and I used to introduce him and say, "He's not my brother, he's a beaver." And just like that, people laughed every time, so I got a laugh. I never thought anything of it. He's now gone to a lot of therapy, but, you know, he's good now, so I want to report to you it's all fine. But it was just things like that that seemed to happen, and Esau and Jacob, they're twins, so it may be a little different, but nonetheless, you can see this dynamic of oldest and youngest. And it says in Genesis chapter 25, if you have your Bible, I invite you to open to that chapter, in verse 27, that the boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a quiet man, staying among the tents. And I don't know what it is, but there's something, if you have two kids, they will be very different. And I don't know how genetics has made that happen. My own two daughters, almost night and day. In fact, after having my first daughter, my wife and I at that time decided we would never have another child again. And we thought we were going to have 4. That's when we began with 4, had the 1, and said that's enough. Now, after a few years, we started to forget how traumatic she was as a baby. And we eventually had the second one, and the second one was so easy it blew our minds. If we'd had the second one first, we would have had the second one really fast. But instead, it took us about 3.5 years to warm up to the idea of having another child. But they're night and day different, and you just look at them and you say as a parent, my goodness, how do we have 2 such different children with the same genes? It's kind of remarkable, and Esau and Jacob, especially as twins, could not have been more different. And so the Bible says they grew up, one Esau out hunting in the wild. He loved to be rambunctious. Jacob was a little more of a homebody, staying around the tents. But what's more telling is the next verse in Genesis 25, verse 28. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah, these are the parents, loved Jacob. Now, we've already done in our sermon series the story of Jacob, and I know some of you weren't there, but hopefully you are familiar with the story. So we're already familiar with the drama that's about to ensue. That's going to lead to a war between the brothers, and one of them, Jacob, fleeing to live with a relative in a far, far away place. But what we did not catch is this one little verse. It's very telling. Isaac loved Esau. Rebekah loved Jacob. And it tells us right here that they have chosen a favorite. Now, Isaac and Rebekah could only have 2 children. Rebekah only had children once, which was twins, and it was Esau and Jacob. And whatever happens in their marriage, they arrive to the point where the Bible tells us one has picked one child, the other has picked the other child, and then soon we will see Rebekah, Isaac's wife, conspiring to deceive her own husband. And what I want to suggest to you is the Bible is hinting that maybe Isaac and Rebekah aren't at the place they should be at. Because 2 parents should not be playing favorites with their 2 children. And they have gotten to the point where now they are pitted against each other, just like the children. Or maybe we should even say, because there was issues in their marriage, because they were dealing separately, because they were living their lives almost apart, that wedge started to bleed into the lives of the children. And I think that's very important for any of us who are parents, because I have had many people in my office who have said to me, Pastor, my marriage is really tough. I don't know. We really don't love each other. We really just kind of function as two separate people. But I'm staying for the children. But I'm staying for the children. As if the children won't notice. As if the children aren't learning from you how to do marriage. As if you just stay, you somehow benefit them. Now, I'm not advocating divorce, but what I'm saying is we're kind of under this misconception that if we just stay and don't put our kids through the trauma of a separation or a divorce, then we have helped them, even though we may be teaching them very bad lessons by staying. And Isaac and Rebekah, when we first meet them, Isaac's vision is good, and now his vision is bad. And I suggested that's a spiritual metaphor, that Isaac seems to have kind of drifted from where we first met him when God providentially brought him Rebekah. And when he brought him Rebekah, the Bible said, and this is when Isaac was 40, and now he's much older, when he was 40 and Rebekah came into his life, the Bible says Isaac loved Rebekah. But now it says Isaac loved Esau. There's a shift. And Isaac, who knows from the prophecy of God that Jacob is supposed to receive the blessing, still decides to make his own way and bless Esau, or at least that's his intention. And I want to suggest to you that Isaac and Rebekah have drifted from where they're supposed to be. That Isaac, as head of the house, is not serving God in the way that he should. He's not following the will of the God at this moment, and it's bleeding into his family, as of course it will. And so I want to speak to my dads today, and I'm one of them. If this is in the situation in your house, if you feel like your marriage is not where it's supposed to be, you don't love your wife in the way you should, just know that it's going to bleed down no matter how much you try to fake it. So much better to deal with the issue. So much better, even if it's hard, even if it's difficult, even if it means you have to get help, even if it means you have to do that embarrassing thing called going to counseling. Do it for the sake of your children. I remember as a young child, and I think every child may have had this fantasy or this little thought at some point. I remember thinking as a child one time, I wish my parents would go on a date. They should go on a date. Why are they always with us? Of course, there was some other motives of wanting some free time. I mean, my mom was always like, couldn't get away with anything in my house. But there was also the motive of, I just want to see them in love. It makes me happy when they're happy with each other. To see them express love to each other, to see them laugh together, to see them play together, to see them enjoy a vacation together, that makes me happy. And of course, as a child, when they're not happy, when there's arguments and fighting and all the stress, and when you can see they're not getting along, when you can see they barely interact, kids notice. And that stresses us out as children. And Isaac and Rebekah, just subtly hinted at here in the Bible, give us an opportunity to re-examine our own marriages. Where am I at? Do I need to take steps to rekindle something that may have drifted away? Do I need to find a little bit of help so that we can get this back on track, so that we can teach our children what a healthy relationship looks like, what a healthy marriage looks like? And we live in a day and age, by the way, where there's more resources than ever to help your marriage, whether it's a book or counseling or seminars or something on YouTube. I mean, you name it, it's out there. You can find the help you need. You don't have to continue when you feel like you've lost that love or that spark in your marriage. And what is worse, you don't have to put that on your children. You don't have to look to get the love from your children that you wish you had from your spouse. And I see it hinted at in this story with Isaac and Rebekah. Well, verse 29, we read how this drama starts to unfold, and it starts here. It says, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, top chef here, cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, and he was famished. He said to Jacob, quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished. And I don't know if you've ever been really hungry, but you can have that moment, right, where you feel like if I don't eat now, I'm going to die. And maybe as a kid especially, and we've got our middle schoolers here, maybe you've had those moments. I remember my mom being particularly mean about this. I would go running into the kitchen, about to die, of course, and say, Mom, when is supper going to be ready? And she would say something terribly cruel like, whenever I fix it. And I would say, of course, being very reasonable, well, then can I get a snack? And I would make my way to the pantry or wherever the quickest snack was, to which she would often meet me with, get out of the kitchen now. And I would go and die. Obviously, I'm no longer alive, and I did not survive, as I warned her I was going to do. And then eventually, food would be ready, and I would scarf it down, and of course, there were always some vegetable there that I had to eat too, and I would do that, but get through it and live to see another day. But when you are so hungry, when you have that appetite that just is starving for something, in that moment, it feels like that is all you can think about, right? It is all that is on your mind. And Esau had one of these moments. And Jacob does what any younger sibling would do in this scenario. Because as a younger sibling, when you have that moment of power over the older sibling, you cannot let that pass. This is the moment you have been waiting for. That older sibling that always dismisses you, tells you to go away, stop bothering me, who won't give you any time or attention, who won't let you play with their things, this is the moment. And of course, like a good younger sibling, you have to go for the highest thing first. Ask big. Now, you know you'll never get the big thing, so then you're just prepared to barter down until you can get at least something out of the deal. And Jacob starts big, as big as you could probably go. He says, first, if you want my yummy stew, then you will give me your birthright. Now, let me explain. We don't do birthrights today, but the oldest child was eligible to receive the largest share of the inheritance. The largest, maybe even 50% or more of the inheritance. And so he says to Jacob, knowing, and I'm guessing Rebekah had probably put in Jacob's ear, you know, God said when you two were born, the younger would serve the older and the younger would be blessed. And so he's probably kind of been a little bit, as we would say today, spoiled by mom. So he kind of feels entitled to this. And so he uses this opportunity, this moment of weakness for Esau, and he says, all right, if you give me your birthright, I'll give you some of the stew. And I think even in Jacob's mind, he's like, well, it's worth a try. Probably won't go for it. I don't know what he was going to barter down to next, but it was he was going to keep fighting until he got something for that stew. That stew was not given out for free, I can tell you that. But he starts with the biggest thing. Now, what's shocking in the Bible story is that Esau's response is, verse 32, look, I'm about to die. Okay? What good is the birthright to me now? I'm about to die. Who cares about the birthright? That comes much later. I need this food. I am famished. Well, Jacob was probably a little surprised that that works so efficiently and easily. And Jacob, not being famished and starved, probably thought, this guy's a little crazy, but I better get this in writing. And so he says to him, swear to me, verse 33. And so Esau swore on an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Unbelievable. Now, we would look at this story, and hopefully you're not too hungry, though I'm sure I've made you hungrier. Sorry about that. But hopefully we'd look at this story and say, what a terrible deal Esau made. This is one of the worst deals ever made in history. And I know Trump has said we've been a part of a lot of bad deals, but this is a bad deal. Selling your birthright for some stew. Red stew. Lentil stew, it tells us later. I don't even like lentils that much, so I can't even comprehend this deal. If it was the right dish of mac and cheese, okay, I'm getting closer, but I don't know. But before we're so hard on Esau, I want to suggest to you that Esau is simply acting on something that's very human. There's something about us when we get in that position where we decide that we really want something. When we really want something, that we've got to have it. Sometimes all rationale, all reasoning goes out the window. And we are willing to trade things that are far more valuable for a little pleasure, for a little satisfaction. We have put things on our credit card that later we said, what was I thinking? We have gone into debt. We've eaten the whole half gallon of ice cream, let's be honest, at one point or another. In fact, psychologists tell us it is a problem that they call impact bias. Impact bias. And the bias that comes over us is that if I have this one thing, it just seems to us to be so desirable that we highly overrate the impact it will have on our life. And guess what? Every company that's selling something markets to get you to buy into impact bias. If you drive this vehicle, you will be so happy, you'll be free, all your problems go away, everybody thinks you're cool, you have tons of really good-looking friends. I mean, it's amazing what happens with this product. And they tap into this desire, into this natural tendency, which psychologists call impact bias. And so if I have this, then my life will be great. And by the way, I'm so glad I have middle school kids here. Are you listening to the sermon? I know I'm an adult and it's boring. I'm sorry. My dad was a pastor. I sat through a lot of them. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. I just thought of the karma of all the things I thought about in my boring sermons of my own dad. But nonetheless, impact bias. There will be times in your life where you'll think, if I just have to have this, I just have to have this. But let me tell you about another phrase we have. We have a phrase called buyer's remorse. You ever heard that phrase? Buyer's remorse is that time after you sacrifice everything for that thing you thought you wanted, only to regret it and say, I shouldn't have done that. That was a terrible decision. That was a bad deal. Why did I do that? Why did I pay all that money? Why did I trade this? Why did I give that? Why did I think this was it? Why did I risk getting in trouble at school because I thought I would be cool? It happens in a million ways. And the challenge with us is we're all born with desires, right? We all have desires, whether it's a desire for food or a desire for friends or a desire to be popular or a desire to be cool, a desire to be valued, a desire to be loved. We have these strong cravings or desires, or we could even call them appetites. These are all words that kind of mean the same thing. And what sin has done in our lives is it comes in, it takes those desires that God gave us, which can be good and we need them. Think about it, just for a moment, let me prove this. What would happen if you had zero desires? You ever thought about this? What if you just woke up and you literally had no desires, appetites, motivations, absolutely none? Why would you do anything? You would just be like, why'd I wake up? Here I am. I mean, there'd be no desire to do anything, move anything, get up, put on clothes. Which clothes should I wear? Doesn't matter, doesn't care. So God put in us desires, and they motivate us, and they propel us, they steer us one way or another. But the problem is sin came along, and sin has warped our desires. And sin says, oh, you desire to be loved. Well, you can find that over here. But that's not where we should find it, because that's not love. And sin says, oh, you have a desire for food. You know what? If you think one donut's good, you should try 12. Besides, it's cheaper that way. Some of you really nodding. Yeah, that makes logical sense. Should eat 12 at once, And so sin comes in, and sin warps our desires. And so we end up searching for things. We end up going to things, and we want them, and we think they're going to fill us, and they think they're going to satisfy us, except that they never really do, because the things that sin and Satan steer us towards, they end up being things that actually make us more hungry. They make us wanting even more and more and more, and you get trapped in this cycle, and then we have a name for this cycle, and this cycle is called addiction. And the devil loves to get us trapped in addictions. And here's why he loves getting us trapped in addiction. And here's why he's steering all of you. And I want you to know this when you're young, because if you learn it while you're young, it will help you and save you so much heartache. And all of us who are older will tell you. If the devil wants to get to steer you towards addictions, because he knows that not only can he get you doing what you shouldn't be doing, that actually destroys your life. It doesn't make you happier. It doesn't make you healthier. It actually makes your life worse. But then in the addiction, as you keep going in time, eventually you don't even want to do it, but you can't help it. So not only are you doing what you shouldn't be doing, now you don't even want to do it, but you're still doing it. And what a miserable way to live. What an absolutely horrible way. And the devil just laughs. He says, you are doing what you don't want to do, and you don't even want to do it, and you're getting no joy, and you're just destroying your life, and you're hurting others, and now I've got you just where I want you. But here's what God says. Psalm 103, for instance. I will satisfy your desires with good things. So God gave us the desire to eat. Let's just use that as a basic human motivation. Call it an appetite or whatever you want. It is fine to eat. We need to eat. I'm glad I have the desire to eat. If you didn't eat, you die. In fact, if you see a lot of people at the end of their lives, that's how the end of their lives kind of comes about. They just lose the desire to eat. And you watch them and they just kind of waste away and then they die. And it's sad, but God gave us the desire to eat, but he also knows there's better choices. You can eat healthy things, and if you eat healthy things, your body gets stronger, your mind is sharp, you feel better, you have energy. But if you eat the unhealthy things, you feel worse, your body starts to function worse, your mind functions worse, and it becomes kind of a spiraling cause and effect. And sometimes we get addicted to food. We try to use food. We think food will make us happy. If I just have this, or it's been a rough day, so I deserve this, and we can use food. And I'm not picking on anybody who uses food. We all have our bowl of stew. It may not be food for you. It may be something else. But whatever it is for you, God is calling you this morning. God brought you here this morning because he's saying to you, hold on, stop. Think about this. He gave us brains so that we could see the destructive patterns that were happening in our lives, and we could go to his word and we could read and we could see, what did God actually give us that's healthy? How has God designed us to meet these needs, to meet these desires? How can I plug in the things that will make my life better and healthier and happier instead of the things that will take me further and further and destroy me and bring me down and hurt others? I can make that choice. Now, I say this because we live in a very real world, and I know it's tough. Addictions are really hard to overcome. Addictions, when you're in them, you feel completely hopeless and powerless, and I get that. But I want to tell anyone who's in the sound of my voice this morning, if you are struggling with addiction, you are not beyond hope. You can change. You can be different. God will honor your choice, but you have to choose it. Nobody can get you out for you. You have to get to the point where you say, I want this addiction out. I want it out more than I want anything else. God help me. And let me tell you, God has the power to set you free. God is more powerful than any addiction. He has done it for people in the past. He will do it for you. I have seen it. I promise you. If you want it, he will get you there. It doesn't mean you have to have the strength, but you have to make the choice. And for any of us that are dealing with someone in our family that's struggling with addiction, this is really hard. And I would love to say, of course, we're all church people, so none of us have this problem. I would love to say that and believe it, except it's not true. We're all human. And sometimes even in church, I think it's worse than it is in the world. Because at least in church, we kind of create this atmosphere where you really have to hide it. And hiding the addiction is one of the ways you give it power. In fact, one of the first things you can do to weaken the power of addiction is tell someone about it. That's a huge step. If you're struggling with something, if you know there's something in your life and you keep falling into this destructive pattern, you know it would be better if you didn't have it in your life, tell someone, find a good friend, someone who has your back, tell your pastor, tell a counselor, somebody, bring it out into the light. The more you hide it, the more it gets stronger. The more power it has over you. And if you don't think it's affecting others because you're hiding it and it's just part of your little hidden life, let me give you a wake-up call. It is affecting others. I've never been with a couple who's come in as a couple to deal with someone's addiction where the other spouse hasn't said, yeah, I suspected it was happening. They always say that. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know the levels. I didn't know how deep it was. I didn't know how whatever, but I knew something was wrong. I knew something wasn't right. So if you think you're hiding it, you're not. So you might as well come clean with it. You might as well take away the devil's power and start bringing it into the light. And by the way, if you're dealing with someone in your family, as I was saying, you can't do it for them. You can't save someone else. You can't free someone else. Only God and them, and it has to be their choice. And that's hard for us, especially if it's one of our children, if we're older and we have children that are older wrestling with things. As parents, you just want to step in there and take it away, right? You just want to put them into rehab. You just want to do whatever you can, and you want to fix it for them. But if it's always you fixing it for them, it will never be fixed. At some point, they have to choose. And God honors choice. He lets us go down these dark paths. If God honors choice, we have to honor choice. Because if anybody wants them freed from it, it's God, more than you do. But he lets them be in it until they ask for help, until they say, I choose a different way. I want to be free. I need to be free. And so sometimes the best thing we can do as a family member is simply pray. Pray, and one other thing. The other thing you can do is you can show them how to live a healthy life. Sometimes I deal with families and there's someone in the family that has an addiction and it's bringing the whole family down, and the whole family just seems to just jump into the addiction with them like they have no choice. I say, you know what? Why don't you show them a better way? If they're struggling with addiction, you don't have to struggle with it. You do your life. You live the way God called you to live, and your health will bring up the level of health in your family. You be a source of strength. You show them. You live and do what you need to do. You take responsibility for what you can take responsibility for, and let God deal with them in his time, in his way. And it may be your spouse. And it may be breaking your heart, and it may be hard, but you do what you need to do. You live the health that you can live, because it will be a model to them. It will be an inspiration to them. And they may even abuse you. They may even call you names. They may even try to bring you down to their level, but you don't let that distract you. You and God have to do what you and God have to do. And sometimes it's just your faithfulness. It's just you showing them a better way, a healthier way, that will get them to that point where they'll say, I've got to get help. I shouldn't be living like this. And sometimes we mistakenly think in love we have to kind of join them and wallow in their unhealth and their dysfunction and their disease. You don't have to. You can pray for them. You can love them, but you don't have to join them. Because if both people go drowning in the water, what good is it? Somebody needs to be on the shore. Somebody needs to be on solid ground. That was a lot from a few verses, don't you think? Well, I want to finish the story because Esau's experience is often, I think, misunderstood and misrepresented in the Bible. And we've cast him so often as the villain in the story. But I want to share with you something that I think is really powerful. And if we continue his story, we get to Genesis 27. Now, this is, we don't know how many years later, but no doubt several years later, maybe many years later. In Genesis 27, you remember Jacob and his mother conspire to deceive Isaac in his old age. And they conspire to deceive him to get the blessing for the younger son, for Jacob. And Esau is asked by his father to go out, hunt, kill some game, fix it the way his father likes it, bring it back, serve him a meal, and then Isaac says, I'm going to bless you, Esau. So Esau, in Genesis 27, does everything his father asks of him. He's a good son. He's obedient. He goes up, he prepares the game, and when he walks in with the food, Jacob has already stolen the blessing. And Isaac realizes once Esau walks in what has happened. And Esau says to him, "But Father, you can still bless me. I mean, I'm here. I did everything you asked. I'm being the good son." And it says in verse 34 of Genesis 27, verse 34, when Esau heard his father's words that he had already blessed Jacob, he burst out with a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, my father." Now this is fascinating because I think this reflects some change in Esau. At first he sells his birthright with no thought, with no care, and it says in the Bible he despised it. He just got rid of it. Who cares? But when it comes to the blessing, he really wants it. I think he had some remorse. I think Esau actually learned from his mistake. And when it came to the blessing, he said, well, I definitely want the blessing. I've already lost my birthright. That was foolish of me. And I want to give you hope this morning because some of us are Esau. Well, okay, all of us have some Esau in us. All of us have had bad decisions. All of us have made bad deals. All of us have done something at some point in our life where we regret it. And we said, I really wish I had done that differently. And so all of that is not wasted if we learn from it. I want you to hear, this is an important point. If you're writing notes, this is a good one. Bad experiences, mistakes, failures, sins are not wasted if we grow from them and we learn from them. And I'm not going to go as far as say that God wanted you to do that, but sometimes my hard-headedness, I think God lets me kind of crash and burn because he knows it's the only way I'll say, whoa, I'm never doing that again. That was a big mistake. I have this weakness. I got to be aware of this. Like, what was wrong with me? I need to fix this. I need to do something about this. I really crossed a line there. Whatever it is for you, if you cross a line that you can start to see was really a bad thing and you really hurt people or you really did this or you really whatever, as long as you can see it, God can use it. If you'll face it, if you'll confess it, if you'll ask forgiveness for it, he can work with you. He can make you a new creature. And I see Esau as a new man here, and he's saying, God, no, I want the blessing. I know I sold my birthright, but I didn't sell the blessing. I mean, he is so emotional about this. He is weeping loudly, and for a man of the open country, that doesn't really fit. We kind of think Jacob would be the weeper, right? You know, like he's the mama's boy. This is the tough, manly man coming in, and he's crying like a little baby. Bless me, Father. No, you have to have some blessing. And just read the exchange here in verse 34. Genesis 27, 34 and 35 here. He says, with a loud and bitter cry, bless me too, my father. But Isaac said to him, your brother came deceitfully, and he took your blessing. And Esau cried out, isn't he rightly named Jacob, meaning deceiver? He has deceived me 2 times. He took my birthright, now he's taken my blessing. Well, hold on, he didn't really take the birthright. You kind of gave that to him. That was a deal you made. But at this point, you see his desire. He still wants the blessing. And he asks his father, haven't you reserved any blessing for me? And Isaac answered Esau, I have made him lord over you. I've made all his relatives his servants and sustained him with grain and new wine. What can I possibly give you? And Esau said to his father, do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father. And Esau wept aloud. This is the heart cry of somebody who regrets what he has done and is hoping for different results. He's hoping for different consequences. He's hoping there's a blessing in it for him too. And finally, his father Isaac says in verse 39, here's all I can say, Isaac says, your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches, away from the dew of heaven and above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Verse 41, Esau held a grudge against Jacob. He held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And he said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. So he's so mad about this. This is common, by the way. I won't ask for a show of hands, but how many of you have wanted to kill your sibling at some point? And maybe, I said don't raise your hands. You guys are so eager. Good grief. I hope your sibling's not here. I mean, just know that your sibling has felt the same way about you, so it's probably fair. But this is pretty serious. I mean, Jacob is really outsmarted and deceived Esau. And Esau is furious because he really wanted this blessing, and now he's lost that too. And he's realizing, and he's feeling rejected, and he plots in his head, when my father dies, Jacob's going to get it. He's gone. I'm taking him out. And that's the way this is going to roll. But what you may have never noticed, at least I never did until this week, is the last part of this verse. The last thing that Jacob says to Esau. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck. Isn't that interesting? You will throw his yoke. Esau, it's not completely hopeless. There's hope for you. And you can throw this yoke off his neck. Now, it's obvious that in the moment, Esau didn't pay any attention to that and didn't get that. But what I want to suggest to you is something rather remarkable. And it's found in Genesis 33 near the end of this story. Genesis 33 and verse 4. Jacob has gone. He had to flee for his life from Esau. He knew Esau wanted to kill him. He goes and he lives with a relative for many, many years. And now you remember the story. Jacob decides he has to come back home. And Esau is waiting for him, and Jacob is scared to death, as he rightly should be. And Jacob is coming back after 20-some years, and Esau is going to meet him for the first time. And we have to wonder, how is this going to go? What's going to happen? And look at verse 4 of Genesis 33. When they finally see each other, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him and threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. And they wept. This does not sound like the same Esau I knew 20 years ago. Something has happened. God got a hold of Esau during those 20 years, and Esau threw off the yoke of Jacob. Somehow he threw off the bitterness. Somehow he threw off the anger. Somehow he threw off the desire for revenge. And I want to give hope to anyone that's here this morning, because I don't know what your family situation is. I don't know who's done you wrong, who's abused you, who's manipulated you, who's caused you all sorts of grief, who's been a big problem. I don't know what you've gone through, but I want to tell you the promise God made to Esau, he makes to each one of us also. Even though it's been hard, even though you've been wrong, I have not taken my blessing. Even if some of it is your own mistakes, your own behaviors that has led to the division that's in your family, there still can come a day when that yoke is thrown off, when you put aside all the anger, the resentment, the grudges, all the things that they did you wrong, all the wounds and the hurts and the long laundry list of wrongs that they have committed against you, that you can give those to God and no longer be under that yoke. Because as long as you hold on to it, you are under the devil's yoke. As long as you hold on to that desire to get revenge or to hurt them, to harm them, or to see them suffer like they've made you suffer, as long as you carry that, that becomes a burden that controls you. And a yoke is such a fitting metaphor, because what is a yoke used for? It's used to control the animal. In psychology, they say you're giving someone else your power. When you hate someone, when you won't forgive someone, when you're hurt by them, when you always have to avoid them or get revenge or whatever, you are giving them power over your life, like a yoke. But God's promise to you and God's promise to Esau still stands. I can set you free. I can take that yoke. And the person that was once your enemy, you could actually embrace in love and weep together for all the sorrow and all the pain that you've been through. It takes a pretty big person, though, to do that. And for as much as we like to villainize Esau, I think he actually came around. And if you read the rest of the Bible, God blessed Esau. It wasn't the same blessing. It was never God's intention. God knew Esau and who he was. It was never his intention that he would be the patriarch through which the children of Israel would come. But God did not abandon him. He blessed him. And Esau did his walk with God, and Esau grew into the person. Now, it took a lot of years, and it took some hardship, and it took the same thing for Jacob. But both of them at the end can come together and weep together and hug each other. And God is glorified. Now, somebody this morning is going to tell me, Pastor, you just preached that right for me, didn't you? You just knew all the stuff that's going on, and you must have just... I didn't preach this sermon for anyone but myself and anyone from what the Word of God says, but I know humanity well enough to know we all have something we can relate to in this story. So my prayer before I got up here and stood and speak to you this morning was that God would speak to you personally, that something from this sermon, something from Esau's story will connect with you and you will know what you need to do next. I don't know exactly what you need to do next. I don't know what part of the story you relate to. But if you need to cast off a yoke, you need to cast off a yoke. If you need to come clean with an addiction, if you need to get help with your marriage, if you know you need to be a better parent, if you know as a child you need to be a better child, yes, that's it. If you need to be a better son or a daughter, whatever God is moving you to do, whatever decision he's making you, moving upon you to make, I want you to make that. You don't leave today without making a choice. You don't leave today without asking God for help. Don't let this moment slip. Don't go, oh yeah, good point, I'll get around to it. No, the devil will make sure you don't get around to it. And the thing about addiction and the yokes that the devil puts on you, years can go by and then you wake up one day and go, what happened? Years of my life. I can't tell you how many alcoholics I've had in my office who have said, I don't even remember my children's growing up. I was just drunk all the time and I don't remember it. And I regret that so deeply, but I can't have it back because it's gone. If you're struggling, don't let those years go by. This is a day. This is an opportunity. You're hearing a word that God wants to set you free, that he wants to meet your desires with good things, not destructive things. He can change your future. He can change your family. Today can be a day where your whole trajectory, your whole family tree changes. God has the power. He has everything you need. He will put people in your life. He will give you resources. He will bring you to a place. It may be hard. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy. You don't think the devil's going to let anybody go quietly. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's possible. It's very possible. And Esau is an inspiration because he threw off that yoke and he lived in the blessing of God. You too can throw off the yoke and live in the blessing of God. That is my prayer for you this morning.